Emergency legislation to limit the movement of 83 criminals, including murderers, rapists and pedophiles, following a controversial High Court decision, has been introduced to Parliament. Live to Olivia Casely now. Olivia, I can see that it is being debated at the moment. It's looking likely it will sail through, though.
That's right, Laura. So the opposition this morning, sources told me that while they want to move amendments to this bill, which they say doesn't go far enough, ultimately they'll back this legislation if those tweaks aren't supported. Have actually been sent through the coalition's proposed amendments. And I'm going to read some of them to you now. So they want to amend the bill so that the conditions imposing a curfew, such as electronic monitoring, are mandatory and imposed on all of the criminals released from detention as a result of the decision. Currently, these are discretionary decisions that the minister may choose to impose. And they also want to amend the bill so that offenders cannot work with children or vulnerable people. Currently, the person requires the consent of the minister. I'm also being told that the opposition is being barred from moving those amendments. So we'll have the latest to you on that as soon as we can. Just to refresh viewers' memories, though, this emergency legislation...
Let me just interrupt you for a moment, Liv. Sorry, because Peter Dutton has just stood up in the House. You can't see that, but I can, so let's listen in.
To try and provide some response which is totally and utterly inadequate. I want to be clear to the Australian people today. The Prime Minister has taken a decision not to re-detain these 84 serious criminals. But worse than that, we were asking for a briefing on this matter, which was provided at 7:15 this morning. The Minister has given an undertaking to this House to add to an answer and to provide a breakdown of each category of offending. It's still not been provided. Still not been provided. So we didn't get any update or any briefing at the start of this week, not on Tuesday, not on Wednesday, but this morning at 7:15, we get the hapless Immigration Minister and the hopeless Minister for Home Affairs in there, who moves from one disaster to the next, comes in there and says, here's the bill. They throw the bill onto the table and say, here's the bill. Will you support it? We want your bipartisan support. We said, well, there are countless provisions in this bill and we want more than an hour and a quarter to be able to look at it, to take legal advice and to decide our position. Because we think, even on the first quick read of it, it is completely and totally inadequate. So they come in here, they move a motion which doesn't allow us to amend their bill at all. But I'll tell you what else we found out during the course of the meeting this morning, Mr Speaker. That is that not only do we have 84 people now out in the community with the prospect of 8 more being released imminently, and these are people with adverse security assessments, so national security risks, murderers, rapists, pedophiles, as I point out, the most serious of offenders against Australian citizens. Not just are we talking about the 84 out now and the 8 about to be released, we're now talking about a pipeline of 340 people. And potentially more beyond that. Potentially more beyond that. And what we do know about some of these cases, and I won't go into them individually, but I was the minister at the time who took a decision to keep them in detention on multiple occasions in some cases. But I can tell you that these people have offended against multiple Australians. We're not talking about some people who have had some indiscretion under the law. These are people who have committed serious offences. And the likelihood of them reoffending is very, very high. And I think it is completely and utterly unconscionable that the Prime Minister has not been here to deal with this matter. The safety and security of the Australian population is the first charge of any leader of this country, and this Prime Minister is missing in action. I would have been happy to sit down with the Prime Minister at any time during the course of this week, overnight, this morning. Was he at the briefing? No, because he's on his plane to another overseas destination. I would have been happy to sit down with him and negotiate a regime that we could pass by legislation that would see these people come back into detention, to see the threat that is imminent, to see the threat that is real to women and children in our country, dealt with and dispensed today. But the Prime Minister has taken a deliberate decision to abandon the Australian people when they most need him. when they most need him. And I think there are many Australians at the moment who are shaking their head in disbelief at a Prime Minister who has the opportunity to address this and has had the opportunity since June to address this so that these people would not have been released in the first place, and has chosen other priorities above the Australian public. Well, we're seeing already some of the victims of these particular hardened criminals who are out there telling their stories. We know, for example, Mr Speaker, that there are particularly egregious cases that we're talking about here. We know that in one circumstance that one individual has been committed of a crime of this nature. And this is not easy to read nor hear, but it's necessary to be said. One person killed a pregnant woman and then blew up her body with military-grade explosives. Now, I think the Australian public is rightly outraged at a government that sees fit to let that person back out into the community. This government has had months and months and months to deal with these issues, and they have chosen not to do so. Why? Because they believe that the rights of these individuals trump the rights of the victims of these crimes and the future victims of these criminals as well. And I don't believe that the Australian public voted for that in May of last year. I think it doesn't matter where you look at the moment across this government. The wheels are falling off. They have decisions before them. They either delay the decisions until the problem compounds into something that they can't manage, which is exactly what's happened in relation to this.
OK, that is the opposition leader, Peter Dutton. He is making some points there that absolutely make sense, bringing up the example of a particular man who has now been released into the community that killed a pregnant woman and then blew up her body with explosives. That is graphic and indescribable, to be honest. Peter Dutton essentially making the point there that perhaps for an individual like that, an ankle bracelet and monitoring and the threat of jail time is perhaps not enough. Let's go back to Olivia Casely now. She's been covering this story for us. Olivia, really strong speech there from Peter Dutton. We expected that in the House today. Essentially, he is saying they don't go far enough. What I can gather from that speech there in the House is that he wanted the government to re-detain some of these people. They haven't done that. The emergency legislation is being debated at the moment. Ultimately, it is going to pass because the opposition see this, anything is necessary at the moment, but want the government to go further.
Absolutely right, Laura. So the opposition clearly unhappy with the fact that they've only seen this emergency legislation a little after 7:15 a.m. this morning, but also that they haven't been able to move some of their amendments. They sort of had some comments this morning that they didn't think that this legislation goes far enough. And I have been sent some of the amendments that the opposition did want to put forward. So I'm going to read them from you now. So they did want the bill to be changed so that these visa holders couldn't go within 150 metres of school or childcare. They say that the current legislation is currently not a condition. They also wanted to ensure and amend the bill so that these offenders cannot contact victims and their families. And they also wanted to ensure that these offenders cannot work with children or vulnerable people. Ultimately, Mr Dutton there, he's indicated that the opposition will still support this legislation. Yep. Obviously, it's very important because these 83 individuals are out, they're free and walking among the community, but they're certainly not happy about it. And I guess what we're seeing here is a ramping up of this attack on the government. They say that they've dropped the ball on a number of issues this week, not only this High Court decision, but also tackling anti-Semitism as well.
Well, here is Claire O'Neill now on her feet responding.
That is what the High Court has told us. So that is why we are putting forward a comprehensive response which deals with the community safety implications of this problem that are real, Speaker. That is why we release people in detention on the strictest possible legal conditions. That is why we set up a joint ABF operation, which is case managing these people in detention. And that is why, Speaker, we are bringing forward a bill to the Parliament which gives our government powers that no government has ever had before to manage community safety risks of people in detention. Now, the Leader of the Opposition loves to present himself as a tough guy on the borders. He never wrote laws as tough as this, Speaker. He never wrote laws as tough as this. These laws will allow the Commonwealth to make sure that we have electronic monitoring of people.
On my left.
Tell us about the Nixon review.
Exactly. These laws allow us to do things that no government has ever been able to do before, to put ankle monitoring bracelets on people we are concerned about, to require approval for employment for people who are going to work in some types of industries, to apply curfews to people, Speaker. And what's really important about this bill, Speaker, is that for the first time we criminalise people who do not follow these visa conditions. This is something that the Leader of the Opposition could have done in the long years that he was Home Affairs Minister, but he chose not to do so. Now, Speaker, we are putting forward what are extremely tough conditions, and the legal advice that we have been given is that we are going as far as we can in order to manage the issues that are before us. Now, the Opposition has got a real choice to make here. They've got a real decision to make, and frankly, Speaker, it shouldn't be a difficult one. They should be coming into this parliament and doing everything that they can to facilitate the fast passage of this bill through the parliament. Everything they can. They have been saying all week that they want us to bring forward legislation.
OK, that's Claire O'Neill responding there. This debate is going to continue in the House for quite some time. This is emergency legislation they're debating, and we see a willing debate, a very willing debate, the most fierce we've seen in quite some time. We're going to keep across it for you.